OMORI as a game is filled with many complex psychological themes, such as trauma, avoidance, and the painful process of confronting one's own actions. After analyzing and revisiting OMORI, there was one theory that began to stick out in my mind: Carl Jung's shadow theory, the idea that a person has two selves, one being the person they display outward, and an inner personality that's often hidden from the world, and in many cases is repressed as the shadow personality shows the cracks and fallacies within someone's mind. Sunny as a character, I believe, fits this narrative perfectly, and moreover, Omori as a game as a whole, as not only Sunny, but other characters often display a shadow personality that Carl Jung describes, and today I want to talk about why this is the case. Before I go forward, I want to announce my new Discord server I've made, so if joining that interests you, the link for that will be in the description, and as with any of my Omori videos, viewer discretion is advised as there will be huge spoilers for parts of the plot of Omori, and this video will talk about some triggering subjects and show some things you might find disturbing. So if anything on screen is something that might upset you, it's best to click away now and come back another time. Before I can analyze Sunny and his shadow, I believe it's important to go over what exactly the shadow theory is and how Omori as a game has it baked into its character design. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist from the late 19th century to early 20th century, and many of his works saw him seeing psychological traits as different archetypes within someone. And some of these are some you might have heard before, those being the quote anima and animus, or the quote collective consciousness. But Jung's most well-known archetype is the shadow, an archetype that is made up of thoughts, impulses, fears, and many other repressed parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge or accept. Because of this, oftentimes the shadow gets projected onto others or the environment around us, as the dislikes we see in someone else are the things we cannot accept for ourselves. A great example of this in-game is when Basil gets removed from Headspace. After Basil views the photograph of Marie laying at the bottom of the stairs, a photograph from the truth sequence that goes over how Basil and Sunny framed her death as a suicide instead of a manslaughter. Because Sunny is unable to process the truth, and because the event caused the truth to be quote-unquote remembered, the shadow of Sunny acts out by removing Basil from Headspace entirely. This altercation alone isn't the only instance of Sunny's shadow acting out. Through both routes of the game, Sunny's shadow can be seen acting in ways comparable to Jung's psychology. Now, some you might be wondering what constitutes as Sunny's shadow. Is it Omori, or is it another external force? And the answer to that is, it's kind of complicated. Omori can be viewed as Sunny's shadow since many of the shadow traits are present within him and oftentimes acts in the same way that you'd expect the shadow to on paper. But with situations like with Basil's removal, Omori doesn't really do that himself, it's more so kind of an external force that does that. So I like to believe that Sunny's shadow isn't exactly a black and white thing or a persona, but rather it's collective actions from both Omori and his consciousness. Both of the routes in Omori, those being the Sunny route and Hikikomori route, both follow Jung's theory. The Sunny route being shadow integration, a process where one confronts their shadow and understands their repression, whereas the Hikikomori route follows shadow possession, where the shadow takes control of the person and their denial, rage, and guilt take full control of their thought process. You can even see this happen in real time depending on which route you do, with more of the truth either coming together or being hidden. Within the Sunny route, just about every instance where Omori gets shoved back into white space is because something about the truth is revealed, whether it be the sheet music from Overworld or the cutscene within the Lost Library. Omori is taken back to white space and the world is somewhat patched, as the next time you can visit these locations, Sunny has either succumbed to the shadow entirely, or they're just simply patched up and you can't access them anymore, such as the Lost Library. Sunny's psychological shadow can be observed in the real world as well, as even certain parts of his house he will refuse to go into, such as the piano room, where he'll only access it on the Sunny route when Hiro and Kel enter it, and will even refuse to acknowledge the existence of the closet that sits to the left of the stairwell in his house, as this closet contains the violin and sheet music he threw on the day of Marie's death. This can be shown by the fact that if you try and access it normally, the game will say, quote, "there is nothing here," And there's a specific jump scare where on the night of 2 days left, interacting with it will cause hands to pop out and will drag Sunny into the darkness, only for him to be standing right outside of the door as it vanishes again. This situation explains Sunny's shadow because these areas are tied to Marie and the events that led up to her death. Sunny's shadow is having an effect on him by literally removing access to parts of the world that would give access or a glimpse to what his repressed trauma is, that being the truth sequence. Despite Sunny's actions during the Sunny route, over time we see the process of shadow integration unfold by slowly learning more about the truth until eventually Sunny fights Omori and he's able to accept the truth and tell his friends what exactly happened. Of course, the exact opposite is what we see in the Hikikomori route, which is where shadow possession occurs. Throughout the Hikikomori route, instead of seeing more and more of the truth, Sunny actually does the reverse and digs deeper into his denial and guilt. So much so that voices such as Stranger are practically eliminated, and the mental burden from his past is so incredibly strong that he has to kind of call on Omori and fuses with him and begins to see himself as Omori in the real world, as his quote-unquote shadow persona. Carl Jung's shadow isn't just a psychological principle that's applied to Sunny, but rather it's one that appears throughout the game in a wide variety of characters and situations. While most of these situations aren't as strong and some might be stretching it, unlike the Sunny and Omori dynamic, some of these could still be considered a part of Jung's shadow theory. The biggest character that stuck out to me first when thinking about this was the interactions with Aubrey and Faraway the first time you come out of your house. On the surface, she just seems very rude and abrasive, making comments towards Sunny's isolation and being very insensitive about the topic of Marie's death in Kel's eyes, but the reason why she's angry is because she felt like her friends abandoned her during Marie's death. Kel has to defend this by saying that everyone dealt with it differently, and because they were kids at the time, and this perceived abandonment causes Aubrey to form her gang. It's potentially possible that one of the reasons Aubrey behaves this way is because her shadow recognized that Kel has moved on from the events of her death. Meanwhile, Aubrey is still stuck on the past and is unable to move on from what happened, ultimately causing her to see a part of herself that she cannot accept, and this leads to her anger being projected onto others. When making this video, it was actually kind of quite challenging to even write the script. As I began to understand Jung's theories, I realized there was a lot less scenarios in Omori than I thought there were to this initially. However, that doesn't mean that its presence is absent entirely, as shadow theory is mainly just present in Sunny and not much in other parts of the game, as the Sunny-Omori correlation fits the shadow archetype much better. If this video was kind of confusing, that's alright. I myself was also very confused when starting to write this. So if you're interested in learning more, or maybe you wish to make a connection that I might have missed, I'll link some resources down below that I used while writing this. And also, I want to announce that since we are so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, I will be making a Discord server for the channel. And if you're interested in being updated with my production process, or you want to discuss Omori and other video game related theories with other people, then hopefully you'll enjoy it. And I wanted to thank you guys so much for that milestone. As I said in my New Year's post, I'm blown away by the overarching support, and my next handful of videos are going to be Omori related. But for now though, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.